Welcome to Book Banter with me, your host, Dianne Burkhart. I hope you will join me every Wednesday as we explore all things to do with, well, books. Let's get on with our show today. Hello, my happy people. Today is October 18th, 2023. Thank you so much for joining me here on Book Banter with Dianne Burkhart. We have got another great TikTok author for you. This guy is definitely somebody you will recognize if you watch TikTok author videos on Book Talk at all. Trust me on this. He is another friend of JC Fuller. Thank you, JC, for bringing another fantastic author to my attention. His name is Otto Schafer, and he is known for writing the young adult series, the Godstone series, but he's also going to be telling us today about a new adult horror book that he has dropping on Halloween. So let's not waste any time. Let's get right to the show. But do make sure to stick around until the very end because I do have a lot of announcements for things that are coming up with Burkhart Books and Book Banter. We've got the Book Banter podcast and the Book Banter magazine, and there is so much going on. You're going to want to hear about it. But now let's bring out our guest, Otto Schafer. I'm so excited to have this next guest. I've been waiting for this interview for a little while because I actually saw him on TikTok, and now I get to have you on my podcast. Can you please tell our listeners who you are and what you do?
Hi, guys. I'm Otto Schafer, and I'm an author. I write fantasy, which is published, and I also write horror, which is about to be published, and I'm writing a psychological thriller as well. So I would consider myself a multi-genre author.
Your main series that you had started out, the young adult series, that is the Godstone series and has been doing extremely well. One of the things that I had noticed is that you talked about this was based kind of on your upbringing in Petersburg, Illinois.
Yeah, that's correct. It was, actually.
And how was this connected?
So I grew up in Petersburg, and Abraham Lincoln surveyed the roads for Petersburg back in the, I guess it would be late 1700s. And there's a little town there called New Salem. It's a park now. It's a state park, but that's where Abraham Lincoln spent his early adulthood and studied to be a lawyer before becoming president. So for me, the town, it's a beautiful town. It's got a lot of Victorian homes. It's on a river. There's bluffs there. It's always felt like a magical place. I'm biased because I grew up there. But myself and my buddies, when we were young, would play in a lot of the tunnels and the different things around Petersburg. So it has this kind of mysterious, magical element for me. And I'd always wanted to write a fantasy that was based in that town.
So did you start out your career as a writer, or did you go for the more traditional day job?
Oh, yeah. I have a whole career outside of writing that takes a lot of my time. I didn't start writing till my children were grown and out of the house. And that's when I started writing. I was telling my wife about some of the ideas I had, and she's like, so all that's just in your head? And I said, yeah, it's in my head. And she's like, you should write that down. And so that kind of got me the motivation I needed to start writing.
So how long did it take from that moment until you actually published your first book?
I started writing in late 2016, and then I published my first book in 2019. And then I published consistently one book a year until the series was complete.
Did you attempt at any point to go traditional, or did you always know you wanted to do self-publishing?
No, I never attempted to go traditional. So I'm a researcher. I love to research everything to a fault almost. You know, whenever I'm making a purchase, I'm researching in depth and drive my wife nuts with it. So she's like, just buy the thing already. And so for me, doing the research before I published, it just made sense to be indie for me. So I never tried to go traditional because I'd already researched, I'd already listened to podcasts. I understood how much control an indie has versus how little control you have as a trad published author. And then some of the perception around if you're trad, everything's going to be done for you, which also is not the case. You still have to market. You still need to be on TikTok and Instagram doing your thing. So, I mean, For me, it was like, why? Well, unless somebody's going to offer me this huge chunk of cash to write a book, which isn't going to happen, then to me, it was like, why do it? So I just went indie and I retained control. I retained more of the royalties. If somebody finds a typo in my book, I can immediately go fix it. Where you can't, I read trad books that are full of errors, and a lot of times they're full of errors because the writer can't go fix those. That's got to go through a whole process. So it's just, I don't know. I like the control. I like the speed at which I can publish. It's my timeline. It's my deadlines. That's the reason I went that way.
Now, one of the things that a lot of indie published authors struggle with is getting good cover art, and you have fantastic cover art. How did you get the art that you have?
Yeah, thank you for that. Honestly, through research and listening to podcasts, I was able to hear about this company called Demanza. Demanza's pretty big and they're pretty expensive, to be honest. So it was an investment to get those covers. You don't have to spend the money that I spent on covers to get good covers, though. But, this was a trusted company. I'd heard good things. So I reached out and went through them. Some other authors, they do a lot of traditionally published art too, like Dean Kuntz's. Some of his cover art was done by them and other big names. But for me, I was looking through their stuff. They have a nice portfolio online, and some of the fantasy stuff was incredible. So I was like, yeah, I really want my stuff to look like that. So that's what I did. And on my new book that's coming out, I went a different direction. Yeah, nothing wrong with the Monza, but I went a different direction that cost me a lot less and is incredible. And I got to work really close with the illustrator. And with the Monza, it's such a big company that you're usually working through a third party. And so you tell them what you want to change. They go back to the designer, tell them what you said. It's just a lot of back and forth like that, which it turned out great. And I'm thrilled with these covers for the fantasy series, but I did go a different direction on the zombie book that's coming out. And the cover is phenomenal on it as well. And I spent half as much money.
And I know that is something that so many authors struggle with, myself included. I've probably changed my covers 2 or 3 times for the first book just to try and find the right feel for the series. And so that's one of those things that I always like to try and ask some of the authors who come on who have really great cover art, because so many people do struggle to find good, reliable sources that meet their need, that actually hit their genre.
So for this series, I found it through a podcast, which is a self-publishing show. They had Demanza on as a guest. Nice. I listened to the podcast and I really enjoyed the podcast and I felt comfortable. So that's how I found them, right? So let's do a podcast. Book I'm about to release on Halloween, the zombie book. Mm-hmm. That cover I found through someone I was following on TikTok. His covers were amazing. And I was like, I need to know who designed those covers. So I reached out to him. He was very helpful, hooked me up with his guy, and then I used him for that cover. So I think to answer the question, look at covers, look at what you like, so you can find an artist that is tried and true. Always look at the work, obviously, right? Looking at stuff, and if you really, really like it or you're drawn to it, then that's how I found who I use.
Now, whenever you first published your first book in the Godstone series, you were obviously an unknown author. How long did it take before you really became a known author, that you finally started noticing that you were getting some traction and that people were consistently buying your books?
Yeah, so I think a couple things happened, right? I was selling books before I was on TikTok, but not the way that I sell now. So definitely TikTok was a big part of it, the platform there. I was already on Instagram for a year before I joined TikTok, but it didn't have the engagement that I see with TikTok. Nothing has had the engagement that I see with TikTok. The book talk community is just great. They lift each other up, and we do that. JC Fuller's a close friend of mine. You mentioned her at the beginning of the show. I love her books. I've read all of her books. I'm reading, except the one that just dropped the other day. I'm reading that now. But that's what we do, is we lift each other up. And that has made a big difference in sales for me. Before that, I entered a few contests when I first put my book out. And there was a contest called the soon to be famous Illinois author competition. I didn't enter it, but a library put my book in. So at the time you had to be entered by a library. Mm-hmm. And a library nominated my book, put my book in, a local library. So I won that for YA Fantasy for that year. That was the year 2020. So it was the year after I published. And I won that. And that put my book in all the Illinois libraries. So It's there. Yeah. So it's in libraries where you can get it. And if it's not physically there, then you can order it. It's in their system, which is really nice. And then the very next year, when I published my second book, I was allowed to enter myself in that competition. They changed the rules. So I went ahead and threw my second book in, and it was a finalist. And I currently have 2 books, my last book and my 4th book, that are submitted into that and in the reviewing phase now. And I don't know, I don't know, where that's going to go, but that definitely helped because it pulled me into some shows and into some podcasts and different things around that. They actually did the award live on a Zoom call and didn't tell me that I'd won and told me on the call. So that was pretty fun. So I got some traction there. And then I played around with ads. Never really had much luck with Amazon ads. I run a really low dollar Facebook ad that seems to give me a trickle through that ad, and then TikTok. And that's pretty much what I do as far as marketing.
I was really impressed with how many other authors on TikTok have done duets with your videos to talk about your books or to just do a review of your book on their own channel. I mean, there are so many people who have done this. And that was one of the reasons how I found her was because of JC Fuller, because I was going through her videos, which I crack up at her stuff all the time. So I'm always checking her channel. But I kept seeing her talking about your books, and that took me to you.
That's the way Book Talk works. I've been extremely blessed to have a lot of people review my book. Every once in a while, I'll see a review, and if I'm tagged in it, then I will duet that review on my page because I feel like if you tagged me, you invited me in. Mm-hmm. Now, if somebody was to review my book and they didn't tag me, I'm going to watch it. And if it's nice, I'll like it. But I really feel like if you tag me, I'm invited. So then I'll duet it and do all those things to show my appreciation. But yeah, it's really neat the way that Book Talk works.
What was it that made you decide to do your series as a young adult series and not just adult fiction?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think I definitely towed the line there a little bit. I tell people 12 and up if you're okay with some swear words, because I'm going to be honest, I cuss like a sailor. And so that was hard for me to tone that down. But, teenage banter, number one, these are teenagers of, let's say, 15 to 18 range. So if parents don't think their kids are cussing when they're away from mom and dad, they're probably kidding themselves.
Yeah.
So I try to keep the teenage banter real, and people love the humor in the teenage banter between the characters. So there is a lot of just things kids would do. One kid has a mustache and he's like 15 years old, so he gets crap for that constantly throughout the series. Turns out to be one of the characters that readers love, which I did not even intend for them to love this character, but I actually had people on TikTok threaten me that if anything happens to that character, they're not going to be happy with me kind of stuff. So, and that's a supporting character. But and the reason I did young adult is, young adult, a lot of it is your character's age space. So if you're writing 15, 16-year-olds, then that's technically should be young adult if your characters are targeted at that age range. That kind of led me there. And I did, again, researched around a lot of that. And the story that I wanted to tell, I'm a huge Goonies fanatic. I love the Goonies, one of my favorite all-time movies. Indiana Jones, National Treasure, Tomb Raider, having that strong female character, which I also have in my book, who is just a badass, frankly. And then, of course, I love Lord of the Rings. Glenn Cook wrote the first fantasy I ever read. And so I kind of wanted to compile all that together, but it just felt right that it was more young adult because these are teenagers that are going on this kind of epic journey. So that just felt like the genre it should be in.
Well, and I think a lot of adults really enjoy reading young adult fiction just because it does have that element of, yes, there is something going on, but it's not terribly detailed.
Yeah,
they don't want that imagery in their head. They do want the story and they want that information, but they don't want the detailed imagery that goes with adult books.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. And I will tell you that hands down, kids, teens aren't the ones reading my books. They are, but I mean, if we're talking about like who's reading it the most, definitely adults, it's females. A lot of times older females that are reading these stories, which has helped a lot with Book Talk, right? Because that's a lot of the audience.
Yeah.
So, I mean, most of my followers are female who love to read fantasy, or they follow me because my TikToks are silly and funny. But I think that mostly women read my stories, and I'll get questions occasionally like, hey, what age can start this? I'm thinking about it for my kids. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times it's maybe a parent who's read it that'll just say, hey, I read this, loved it. My daughter's reading it now, or my son's reading it now, or something like that. But typically, I mean, I know teens read them, but it's more adult.
Speaking of your TikTok channel, I noticed that you have, I think, over 14,000 followers now. And many of your videos have thousands of views on it. But there was one that I saw that had, I think, 10,000 plus views for this one video with chocolate chip cookies. Do you remember the one?
Don't. With chocolate chip cookies?
Mm-hmm. The audio to
Oh,
it was
oh, I remember it now. Yeah.
that people say that you need to do protein shakes.
Yeah.
I about spit out my tea when I was watching that because the way that you react to some of these audio clips that you use in your videos, and then you're using it to actually promote your book, it is brilliantly done. You are
Thank you.
so good at doing that, taking these audio clips that have absolutely nothing to do with books or reading or you or anything and making it about you and your books. That is definitely a great marketing talent that is unique to you that I have seen. And you are brilliant at it.
I appreciate that. It's definitely been challenging because coming up with new things and but that's the creative piece, right? We're authors, we're writers. I think creativity, I've never had like a struggle with being creative in my writing. So creating these TikToks, it's a little bit like that, right? You're taking this sound and you're trying to brainstorm what you could do with it.
Now, I saw on your website that you have 3 boys. Have they read your books?
That's funny because no, they haven't. My middle one read about half of the first. They're not readers, number one. So they're in this place in life. Like my youngest one, he's 24, and my oldest is 31. And so I'm a little bit older, but I started young.
I was going to say, you do not look old enough to have a child that is in their 30s.
I know. And one of them works, he's a marketing rep for a big company. The other one does construction, and the other one is an electrician. So they're all three just busy with life. I've got a son who's got a little one. So I'm a grandpa too. And they're just super busy with life. And I don't expect them to read them. Now they've all got them. They've all got my books, which is nice. They've all got them. And I imagine someday they will. Now my middle one, he did read about half of the first one. And he is totally not a reader, but he just wanted to. Mm-hmm. He's like, I just want to read your book, Dad. And I'm like, okay, read. Yeah, good, cool. And he read about half of it and didn't get back to it. So yeah.
That's got to be an interesting situation to be in, to be an author with so many books out and have family that are not readers.
Yeah. Yeah. My youngest one was when he was when he was young. I shouldn't say he's not a reader because he is. He just doesn't have time. He's raising a kid and doing all that. So, and they've all got their own side hustles that they're doing too, So it's just life, being busy. Someday they'll read them, or my grandkid will read them, or somebody will read them and go, oh, my great grandpa wrote those. That's kind of cool.
This is the point of the show where we like to do 5 quick questions that never turn out to be quick, but we're still doing the bit anyway because I'm stubborn. Are you ready?
Sure.
Question 1. What is your favorite thing about living in a log cabin?
Favorite thing about living in a log cabin? The aesthetic, I think, really. I just love the look and feel of a log cabin. And I guess, thermally it's nice too because it stays pretty cool throughout the day and the logs absorb heat throughout the day and then it kind of radiates in at night. So it's efficient too. So it's both efficient, but for me, it's more about, I just like the aesthetic of a log cabin.
Yeah, I definitely agree about that. They just look cool.
Yeah.
Number 2, have you ever had a moment of writer's block?
I have not. I will struggle with maybe a plot issue or some type of story issue. And when that happens, I like to get out on the trail and just run. I have done a lot of ultra marathoning. I've run a couple 100-mile races. So running in the woods is something that I value and really helps with my stress level and just feeling good. But when I get out there and I get the blood pumping, I can solve just about any writing issue I'm facing. So I'll feel it. I'll be like, okay, I need to go for a run and we'll sort this out. So that's how I handle that, but not really writer's block.
Okay, wait a minute. I need to make sure that I heard this right. Did you say 100-mile races?
Yeah, I've ran 2 100-mile races. I've done several 50-mile races and a lot of like 30Ks and 50Ks and other distances. But it's in the woods on trails, so it's not like maybe you imagine like I'm just running the whole time. There's a lot of hiking on the hills and things, but you are going 100 miles nonstop, except to maybe like change your socks or grab a snack from an aid station. But yeah, 31 hours. I'm not fast, but 31 hours straight, no sleep. It's a challenge for sure.
Wow. And here I'm proud of myself just because I still walk to the grocery store and carry groceries back. I I need to rethink my goals now. Okay, question 3. What is your favorite moment where you got to meet a fan?
Oh, I've got a great picture on Instagram where I'm at a book signing and there's a little kid who was really excited. He was probably 10, maybe. His parents were with him, but he came up and shook my hand and wanted to buy a book. He was so shy. When I shook his hand and gave him a book, you could see how excited he was to be meeting an author. It was like a big deal. And so for me, it was a really special moment. And someone took a picture of it and then sent it to me, and I posted it on my Instagram. But that was probably the one.
That is so cool, because you could be inspiring that child to be more of a reader.
Right? Yeah.
So now, question 4. When you were a child, what was your favorite book?
When I was a child, well, everybody loves like Lord of the Rings, and I do too, and a lot of those type of books. But I think, wow, man, I started off reading like the Ramona stuff, and I was reading a lot of Beverly Cleary books. Mm-hmm. Matter of fact, no one catches these things, but I do put these little eggs throughout all my books. And I don't know if I've ever even talked about it, but like there's a librarian. They kind of use the basement of the library as their home base in maybe the second book. And the librarian's name is Miss Cleary.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, and if we know anything about Beverly Cleary, she was a librarian too. Mm-hmm. So there's nothing else said about it, but you just catch that name as that's the librarian. So for me, yeah, Beverly Cleary was probably where I started. And then I graduated into the Lord of the Rings stuff. And Glenn Cook wrote a series called Black Company. That was my first fantasy stuff that I read. And you don't hear much about Glenn Cooker's books, but he had some fantastic characters throughout that series. But Black Company was my very first fantasy read. Kind of made me fall in love with it.
Question 5. What is your favorite thing about TikTok?
That's easy. It's the community, right? It's the people that you meet. It's the way that we interact with each other. It's the way that we lift each other up. I mean, if you look at my TikToks too, they're not all about my books, right? I'm also reviewing other people's books and other indie books. I'm getting ready to read my first spicy book, which I know. And, because, I met this author and we were on a live together, and I was like, I'm going to get your book and I'm going to read it. She laughed and she said, I can't wait to hear what you think. And I know it's like super spicy too. So I'm going to give it a read and then talk about it.
I'm going to watch for that review too. Okay, now with the gift buying holidays coming very quickly upon us, I have added a bonus question to the 5 quick questions that every author is getting asked the exact same question.
Okay.
What is your best suggestion for gifts to buy for the writer or reader in your life?
Well, it'd be easy to say, yeah, buy my book for for the readers in your life. But so it is taking place in a modern day world. And then we bring in all the fantastic mythical creatures throughout the series. The first book reads more like a mystery. The second book, I mean, you get into a little bit of the magic in the first book, but then in the second book, you start to really pull in a lot of mythical creatures, and you get to see how I bring dragons back into a modern world. You get to see how I bring giants back into a modern world in a most realistic way I could do that. And then we go forward from there. So if that's your thing, then certainly my book would be great. But I think understand what your reader in your life enjoys. And there is a book out there, and it may not be mine, but if it's mystery, JC is a great one. If it's horror, I've got one coming out at the end of the month on Halloween. That's zombies, if you're into zombies. So I would say just know what they like. And yeah, a book is always great. Now, if you look on TikTok, and I'm not the only one doing this, book boxes, I would say book boxes are a great gift.
Oh, yeah.
You can get mine through my link, but book boxes typically come with a whole bunch of cool stuff like bookmarks and stickers. And some of them include recipes. Some of them include fantasy maps. So there's a whole bunch of different cool stuff. And a book box, I think, is a great gift for a reader. As far as a writer, interesting. I think maybe like I've seen people give really cool pins to sign books with as gifts.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Kind of neat. So I think just think about what tools maybe a writer uses or things like that. I had somebody send me a crown for a gift. So if the person in your life is into TikTok and does book reviews and stuff, maybe send them a crown. That's kind of
cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is the deal behind that? Because I've noticed that.
Yeah.
But I haven't heard the reason behind that.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. When I got on TikTok, I only saw women wearing tiaras and crowns and stuff. The fantasy of being a princess. I think it's just part of the fantasy, right? Of reading these dragon-filled books and stuff. But somebody sent me one and I was like, heck yeah. I actually modified my crown. I cut it and then I put a soft lining in it and stuff so I could put like some stretchy material from one side to the other in the back so I could actually stretch it, stick it on my head so I could actually wear it.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see in my videos, right? I've worn my crown a lot. But yeah, I was super appreciative of that. And, I got a lot of people that were like, just love the crown. I don't know. It is definitely a book talk thing, though, to have a crown. I connect mine to characters in my book. I've got a pretty villainous king in one of my later books. And so usually when I'm wearing the crown, I'm a bad guy. So yeah, I try to connect all that stuff. But yeah.
Now, do you have any more meet and greets coming up for people that they can come and find you?
I don't have anything scheduled for a meet and greet right now. That's awful. I know. I've been so focused on getting this edit finished on this new zombie series and getting it out by October 31st that I've been pretty much solely focused on that and creating the book box, because the book box for the zombie book is going to be very special, different than anything I've ever seen. And I've been working really hard on this darn book box to make it pretty epic. So I've been working on that. It's pretty cool. It's coming along really well. But no appearances.
So now, where are people going to be able to find this?
You go onto my TikTok, it'll be really any of my social media platforms. There's a link tree in there. And in that link tree, it says Otto's, signed copies of Otto's books. And there's a Google form, and people can just fill out that Google form. And then I invoice them. They pay the invoice, and I ship them the book box. That's the way that I've got that set up.
Besides the book box, do you have any author swag with your logos and things on it?
No, the book boxes come with swag, but I'm not selling swag yet. I don't know that I'm that popular enough to really have merchandise at this point, but it's something I definitely consider in the future.
You might be surprised. I think there's probably enough people who would want a Godstone coffee cup or sweatshirt. People love to wear that stuff whenever they're snuggling in for a read on a chilly night.
That's a really good point. I'll definitely think about that. I know my wife has mentioned it to me as well. Like, we need to make some stuff that you could sell. And I'm like, okay. I just haven't put in the work to figure that out. But I definitely hear what you're saying. I need to think about that. You know what I need? I need to get big enough so that I can have an assistant that helps me.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
Someday, right? Someday. That would be nice.
I think that's one of the main dreams that all of us indie authors have is to be able to make enough money to hire somebody to do the stuff that we don't really have the time to do so that we can actually write our books.
Yep.
That's the one thing that I always try to impress with people is that you have no idea what really goes on behind the scenes of one book getting published.
It's so much work. It is so much. And really, the amount of work you can do is endless, right? You just have to decide like how much time you have to do it. There's so much more I could be doing. And I see some authors doing so much better than me at the marketing side of it and what they're doing, even on TikTok and different places. And I'm like, I'm happy for them. That's amazing. But I just wish I had time to do more.
I keep getting too involved in things like I started the podcast and now I'm doing the magazine that's connected to the podcast. And I keep thinking, oh yeah, at some point I need to remember to write a book.
Yeah.
I'm an author too. And I just keep thinking, okay, wait a minute. When did I put out the last book? Oh, dang, I need to write another book.
Yeah, because that's what we enjoy, right? That's why we got into this, is because we want to tell the stories.
And the whole point of doing the podcast and the magazine and things like that was to publicize my books, but I have to actually put my books out to publicize anything.
For TikTok, it really was the point of getting on the platform was to sell my books. Mm-hmm. But I found so much more there than just a way to sell my books. Oh, yeah. I've made so many good friends and found such a great community that didn't exist on any other platform that I was on. And it's just like, now it's like, oh, and I have books on there too. Maybe that's not the right way to look at it from a business perspective, but I just really enjoy the community and the friendships that I've made there and helping others.
Well, and me being an American author living here in Germany, I don't get to network with other English-speaking authors very often. TikTok gives me that avenue. Yeah, it is where I am able to network with other authors, even though I'm not in the US. I can connect with people who are writing from the same culture and the same language, and it is so beneficial.
I can see that 100%.
So now, is there anything that you would like the listeners to know that we have not covered?
I think we covered where to get my books, what books are out there. Just watch for October 31st, Halloween, because I do have one coming out if people are interested in that.
And what's the title of that one?
That one, Rust Colored Rain. It's the first book in the Rack and Ruin series.
And are all of your books available on audio as well? I know it's like paperback, hardcover, ebook. Are they also
Yes,
on audio?
they are. All of them are available on Audible. Jump on Amazon. You can get to all my books in all the formats. But yes, they are available in paperback, hardcover, Audible, Kindle, all that. And they are in Kindle Unlimited. So if people have the subscription, they can get them that way too. But Audible has been really great. If you're a writer out there with some books published and you've been thinking about it, Audible's great. You should go that route. Maybe not necessarily Audible, but getting your book on audio is definitely something you should consider because it just opens up a whole nother readership for you, a whole nother way to get your books out there. And I have a lot of people who tell me, hey, if it's on Audible, I'll get it, but I don't have time to sit and read a book. And so it's like, hey, well, it is out there. And don't narrate yourself. Unless you're a professional already, let a professional do that. And then some people will be thinking, yeah, that's nice if you can afford it. Well, there's different ways to do it. Number one, there's a range that you pay these folks. You can pick someone within your range and it's a per finished hour. I use ACX. Mine are published on Audible. I did pay for mine outright, but you can also do royalty shares. So there's other ways where you can not have to do out of pocket if you're willing to split some of your royalties with the narrator for a set number of years. I'm just saying there's ways to get your book out there professionally narrated without having to take money out of pocket. So there's options, but I think it's definitely worth investing in on the audio side.
I have to agree. I've spoken to so many authors who just talk about that their audiobook sales sometimes will just outsell everything else in a given season.
Yeah, that's accurate.
I also want to let all of the listeners know that everything that we just talked about as far as being able to find you will be listed in the links in the description of the podcast. So everybody will have the opportunity to just click and go and find all of your information.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with me on Book Banter with Dianne Burkhart. This has been so much fun, and I hope everybody goes straight to your TikTok channel and checks out your videos because they are so fun and definitely worth viewing.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And thank you for having me on your show. I appreciate it.
So there you have it, my happy people, the fantastic Otto Schafer from TikTok. Be sure to go check out his videos and then check out his website where you can check out his Godstone series, which is an award-winning young adult series. And then also keep watching his social media for Halloween when his new adult horror novel drops. Rust-Colored Rain. You are not going to want to miss out on this. Trust me on that. Now for some of the things that are coming up with Book Banter magazine. You are going to love the November issue. It is coming together so well. This issue is all going to be about fall cozy comforts. We have got some great comfort reads. We have got some great comfort foods. And we're even going to have some author swag where you can find some cozy, comfy, warm clothes with your favorite authors' logos and book covers on it. This is going to be such a fun issue. And our feature author for November is a cozy mystery writer. He writes The Quilt City Murders, and his name is Bruce Leonard. And I have to tell you, after having this interview exchange with him, this man has so many facets to him. He is absolutely fascinating. I never would have guessed there was so much to this individual. You are going to be amazed. The only thing I'm trying to figure out is how to get all of this incredible information about him into one article. It's incredible. We may have to have him come on the podcast too, just so you can hear more from him, because I think he would definitely be worth a listen. But for now, I think it's time for you all to go forth, try and stay warm, and be very happy.